The pamphlets, if you read them, said, "The war is over." They were flyers just flying down because they were trying to let everybody on the island know that World War II was done. This was 1944, and if you were doing research today, if you went to school today, they would tell you that World War II ended right about then. But for one guy in the Philippines, up in the jungle, when he'd been dropped off from Japan, his boss, his captain, had said, "You will fight on until you're done." And so when he got those pamphlets, when they came flying down and he picked it up and he read it, he's like, "This is a trick." Jeeps drove all over the countryside of the Philippines and on every one of the little islands, and they were screaming out in bullhorns saying, "The war is over. Like, you can come down, we're done. No one's going to take you prisoner. We're done. It's over." And he would have his rifle, which he polished incessantly, and he would have his rifle, and he would take shots at the Jeeps driving by because he was like, there's no way. College kid came, right? Came from Japan, went traveling all around the world, and stopped in the Philippines to find this guy, to tell him the war's over. Of course, this college kid came in the 70s. And he said, "I won't believe it until you bring my captain to tell me that." And so they arranged a time, and he flew back to Japan. He found the captain, which is now grandfather, right, running a little bookstore, found him, brought him back to the islands, to the aforementioned place where they met. And the captain told him, 29 years after World War II was done, told him, "It's over. You can come out." The reason I tell you this is because the lies that we believe, fundamentally impact the actions we take. Now, I hope that none of us get stuck living, eating off the forest and the jungle and get stuck living 30 years beyond the time that any major event has happened. And today, thankfully, we're not talking about history and World War II. We're talking about blogging and writing. And yet, there are lies you believe right now that impact your writing. There are lies that are holding you up. And so, for the time that we have, what I want to do is just walk through some of those. 5 lies. Does that make sense? Everybody ready for those? Yeah? Okay, let's do it. Mistake number 1. We only blog when we feel inspired. How many of you feel like you've heard someone tell you, I'm not talking about you, you've never said this, but you've heard someone else, right? And they've said, when I feel like I have something important to say, when I feel inspired, I will sit down and write. Any of you? Yeah? That's how I treat exercise. When I feel like running, I lay down until it goes away. Then the feeling's done and I'm good. Right? Some people say no pain, no gain. I say no pain, no pain. And yet, we fall for that. Well, I just need to be inspired. I don't feel inspired, so I'm just not going to write. The second one. Oh gosh, I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. I don't have an audience. Nobody wants to read what I say. I don't have anything particularly valuable to say. Well, I'm going to probably write it wrong. I haven't written as often as someone. I could go on, right? And at the end of the day, it's all just a set of insecurities. Right? It's a set of fears we have and the negative self-talk that impacts our actions. Now, I want you to think about this for a second, because the prison that you're in, if this is holding you back, is one of your own making. Nobody else has locked you up. Nobody else has told you you can't do it. The only one to blame is you. And yet, show of hands, how many of you never are insecure? Come on, would the psychopaths raise their hand? Yeah. No, we all have insecurity. And yet, if we let that insecurity hold us back, we've put ourselves in our own prison, and we have robbed the world of our voice. I know that some of you think, well, I don't have that much of a voice, so it's not that big a deal. I want you to think about it in a different way. I want you to imagine that the planet has been building the largest puzzle ever. I don't know how many of you do puzzles. I'm not so much of a puzzle person, but my family is kind of into puzzles. And so when we go on cruises, because we don't keep puzzles in our house, because that would be kind of dangerous, when we go on a cruise, that's where they have puzzles. And so it's not shocking if you go on this cruise, which I've spent ungodly amounts of money on, so that we could go and do fun and cool things. And my wife and children are in the library with puzzles. And you're like, are you kidding me? What are you doing playing with a puzzle? Look at all the things we could do. And they're like, oh, we just love playing puzzles. So there they are on the table. And they're looking at a piece, and they're looking at the particular shape of a piece. This is the way my wife does it. Most of us, we just look at the puzzle, we look at the colors on the thing, and we go, okay, where's this going to fit? But that takes way too much work, right? Because you're trying to figure out where it fits on the board. My wife doesn't do that. She just looks at the piece and the shape. And she looks at this shape, and she goes, every piece is unique. And so when I find the right piece and the right shape, I look, where does this shape fit? I want you to imagine for just a second that we're all building the biggest puzzle ever. And your voice is a piece. Now I want you to imagine that puzzle almost done. And I don't know if you've ever worked on a puzzle of any sort, but if you're like me, when you look and there's that one piece missing, maybe because kids played with the last puzzle box and the piece got lost, and you're looking at a puzzle that looks almost perfectly done, and you're missing that one piece, how many of you would get angry? Yeah, the rest of you are lying. Because you're like, we're basically there. All we need is when you let insecurities hold you back, you're taking your voice, your piece of the puzzle, and you're removing it from the play. You're removing it from the tabletop. You're removing it from the puzzle. The puzzle is never going to get done without your voice, without what you and only you can contribute. And so we sit here locked up because of our own securities, and we never go into our pocket, we never pull out the puzzle piece, and we never play. I don't have a lot of goals in life. I'm not one of those guys who just makes a list of all the things I'm going to accomplish and stick it on the wall. That's not it for me. That's not the way I work. But every person I meet, in any capacity, I feel compelled to find what's the uniqueness they bring to the table, what's their voice have to feel like, and I try and get them to play their puzzle piece on the board. And if I die and that's all I've done in life, I'm like, it's pretty good, because I know how frustrated I would be to look at the table and look at the puzzle and feel like, oh, we could have been finished, except there were puzzle pieces that never got played. If you let your insecurities hold you back, you and the rest of the world will never benefit from your voice. And the third is, well, we only blog when we have a new insight, something new, something compelling, something interesting, something the world has never thought of and never heard of, some interesting new, invention that we're ready to lay claim to. And what happens? Right when we have found our thing, right when we have discovered this is perfect, we're inspired, we go and what do? We go to Google and we search for it to see, like, what other research could I help? And what do we find? We find the title. Exactly what we were going to write has been written before. Right? And when you find the title, you're like, I know stuff about client management that no one knows. I know something about custom post types that no one knows. I know something about picking a web host that no one knows. And you're ready to write it. And you Google it and you see the title and someone's already written it. And what do? Someone already wrote that. And if someone already wrote that, I can't add my insight. Can you imagine for just a second what it would be like if all of Broadway and every one of the shows on Broadway stopped once the initial cast was done? Can you imagine what would happen in every city if the city said, well, we're not going to do that musical if we don't have the original cast? See, the thing that's interesting, my wife and I like to go to these musicals and we go to these shows and we listen and we go, that was fantastic. Now, you may be the kind of person who goes, well, that wasn't the original, blah, blah, blah. But that's not us, right? And the truth is, all it takes is for one person in the audience to say, they were amazing, for it to be worth it, right? I just took my wife and kids to New York a couple months ago. And when we were in New York, we got to see Phantom of the Opera. Now, the folks that were doing Phantom of the Opera, they were not the original cast. But we gave a donation because it was close to Christmas time. We gave a donation, and they allowed us to go backstage and meet the Phantom and meet the girl whose name I never remember, who sings to the Phantom. I know you're all like, I know the answer. I know the answer. Great, write a blog post about it. So we got to meet them, right? And you know what we didn't say? No, well, we always say thank you. I have children. I got to teach them right in this world. No, we didn't say, you know, you're not the original. Who would do that? We just said, you were amazing. That was so incredible. Right? Just because someone else has written a post doesn't mean you can't write one too. Now, what I recommend is, you read the title and you go, oh, I was going to write that post. Don't read their post first. Write your own post. Write your own voice. Then go back and read that. And if it's good, go back and edit yours and say, hey, another take on this is, and link over to them. Right? Say thank you. Hey, you know, I'm glad we're both talking about this stuff. But write your own post. And don't worry that someone else has written it. This is a lie we tell ourselves. If someone has taken that little corner, if someone's written about it, then I can never write about it again. And that's not true, because your voice is what makes you unique. Your take, your opinion, your approach, the way you think about the world is going to make that topic different when you write it. Does that make sense? Are you starting to worry because we're already 3 down and we're like, oh my God, we're going to be done in 12 minutes? I got more for you, don't worry. The bottom line of it, and if you know me at all, you'll know that my take of it is we just need to learn to tell good stories. This is what makes anything we write compelling. And so if you're going to learn to tell good stories, this is the formula you need to understand, okay? You need to understand composition. You need to understand the structure of a post. You need to understand rhetoric, the approach and the way you use words. You need to understand allegory and the use of metaphors. You need to understand perspective and your personal... Here, let me show it to you a different way. Okay, that's all crap. You do not need to become a proficient and excellent writer or novelist to write a blog post. It's not true. It turns out you are all natural storytellers already. You started lying when you were a child. Right? You've been telling stories since you could talk. And we all do it. I love my wife. I think she's amazing. She's incredible. She's sweet. She's wonderful. I'm doing this because there's a camera right back there. No, I'm kidding. She is amazing. But here's the thing. Sometimes what she does is she reads me something she found on Facebook that she found interesting that I find completely useless. And so I've told her to start the story by saying, I'm going to read you something random from Facebook, in which case I'm totally good then. Because if she doesn't say that, I start going, where's she going with this? Where's she going to go? Like, how's this going to connect? What does this have to do with the thing that we were doing? You know why my brain's doing that, other than I'm weird? Don't shout that. You know why I'm doing that? Because we all tell stories. And so no matter what it is that we're talking about, no matter how we're communicating, when we're talking, in the back of our head, we're starting to go, where's he going to take this? Where's he going to go? What's this going to mean? Where's going to be? How's this going to turn? Can I predict the end? How many of you watch TV shows and you declare Before something happens, you declare what's about to happen. I hate you all. Yeah, because my wife does that too, and it turns out she's smarter than I am, and most of you probably are too, and so you all figure it out about 14 minutes before I do. And so what happens? She's like, oh, that guy's a bad guy, he's gonna get killed. You're like, what? Why did you steal the whole next set of parts of the show, and I can't figure it out now, right? But we're all trying to figure it out because we're all natural storytellers. Think about the way you tell a story, right? When you are thinking of a story, you start by thinking of your main point, right? When you're thinking of a story, someone says something, right? Oh, you should see my friend. He broke his collarbone. It's really bad, whatever. And you go, oh, wait. I have a story about a guy who broke his collarbone. So is that when you talk? Do you say, oh, my friend broke his collarbone too? Some people do, but most of the time we don't do that. We go, oh, wait. Let me back up. What's the context? How did my friend break his collarbone? And we start thinking about, we're remembering the parts of that story. And then we're like, wait. How do I start this? Right? How do I open with it? So if I told you, I had some buddies. They went down to Baja, California. 3 or 4 of them were hanging out, and they decided they wanted to cliff dive. I don't know if any of you have ever cliff dived before, but it's kind of intense, and it's super high up. And so these 3 guys got to the very top, and the first guy jumped, right? Hit the water, looked up, waved his arm and said, like, they couldn't hear him, so they just imagined that he was saying, like, this is amazing. So the next guy jumps, right? The next guy hits the water super hard. They're like, that was a big splash. And he's kind of, yelling up there and pointing, and they're like, I don't know what he's saying, but this is pretty cool. And so the third guy jumps, right? He hits the water super hard. And turns out he broke his collarbone. The second guy broke a leg, and the first guy broke an arm. And the moral of the story is the next time your friends are telling you, let's go cliff diving, the answer is no. Now you see how that story worked? I had a point. Hey, I have a friend that broke his collarbone too. Don't cliff dive. But if that's all I tell you, hey, I have a friend that broke his collarbone, don't cliff dive. Like, what? So I got to go back to context. In the context, I have to, I have to set up. Then I go, oh wait, I got to find a place to start. So now, as I start, I have some friends. They went down to Baja, California, and you're like, where is he going with this? What's he going to say? Does he know about my trip to Baja? Only a few of you had that thought, and you're special people. I don't care what your mom says, you're special, right? But you know what happens when we tell the story? The exact opposite approach. When we tell a story, we start at the start, we give people context, we end with a point. And trust me when I tell you, every one of us does it. You do it instinctively. You do it naturally. I used to hate, because I do a lot of public speaking, and it takes a lot of work to prepare a talk like this. And so what would happen is I would give a talk like this, and then someone would say, that was Chris Lama, he's a natural storyteller, everybody give him thanks, and I'd walk out, I'm like, natural? It takes 6 weeks to prepare this. There's nothing natural about it, right? But the truth is, when you think about it, we are all natural storytellers, because we all do this, right? Your mom walks in the door and says, why are your shoes on the telephone line? And you never say, because I threw them on the telephone line. No, you're like, okay, there's got to be a reason why I did this. It's probably someone else's fault. Let me back up. Okay, Mom, hold on. You got to see. There's a story here, Mom. Mom, hold on a second. See, because I was playing with Jimmy. And then Jimmy was doing, and we start telling the story. We all do this. So acting like we're not storytellers, acting like we can't do this, you're lying to yourself. You can totally do it. I know you'll say, well, but here's the problem, Chris. I don't have interesting stories, right? Yeah, that was funny or whatever, but I don't have anything interesting that people would want to read. And that's line number 4, right? Oh no, I'm only going to blog when I have something interesting to say. The truth is, we all have things that are interesting to someone. I know this because in my house, when my wife starts reading off those Facebook random posts and she's like, hey, remember I told you about my friend? Then she backs up, hey, I'm about to tell you something random from Facebook. And I'm like, okay. And then she's like, remember I told you my friend who works at NASA? Yeah. They just launched blah, 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 and they got this thing, blah, blah, blah. At least I'm not stressed about trying to figure out how it works, but I'm like, so what? But my kids? That's amazing! Are there videos? Can we watch? Can we see? They love it. There is always someone, a target audience for that message. There is always someone who finds that story interesting. So when you declare, I'm not interesting, you're declaring that you understand the entire universe and all the people in it, and that you know exactly what they find interesting, and you've decided that you're in the null set, which is a lie. There is someone, bless you, there is someone who finds you interesting. For me on my blog, for the first few months, it was my mom. You can still see on Facebook. It doesn't matter what I write. I'm at the airport in Amsterdam. Like. I'm flying home. Like. I'm now in Miami and I just want to go to sleep. Like. I'm like, okay, this is a little crazy, Mom. Should probably stop this. She's like, I like everything you do. There is someone, there is an audience that finds your voice interesting. And what's most interesting about it is you won't know until you start. You will not know until you start writing and you find your voice and you find your audience. Now, you don't need to be interesting, inspiring, insightful, or free from insecurities to blog. That's the good news, right? The good news today is that all those things that were holding you back, all the reasons you tell yourself, all the roadblocks you find between you and that blank page, they're not true. You can reject them. You can say, that's just not true, and I'm just going to act as if I believe that they're not true. What you need is a framework. You need some approach, some strategy for how to get started when you're looking at that blank page. I've written over 900 posts on chrissummit.com. Until now, the how has been a secret. Haven't told anybody. But to you, can I tell you guys a secret? I mean, will you keep it a secret? Can I trust you? I'm going to share with you a secret. It's super secret, and when I show it to you, your minds will blow out. There will be brain matter on that wall, brain matter on that wall. Some of you extra smart people in the front, it's going to go up and hit the roof. It's going to be crazy. Are you ready? Okay. It's an inverted pyramid because every framework I've ever seen is in an inverted pyramid. I'm ridiculously insightful when I created this pyramid. It's not that crazy. It's not that secret. It turns out you need a source. From the source, you're going to go, oh, I have a story. From the story, you're going to say, what's the point? You're going to find a lesson. You're going to realize that lesson has to be shaped for an audience. It's not just a generic lesson because that's generically boring. So you're going to shape it for an audience. And you're going to end with a point. What's the point of what I'm sharing with you? What is the takeaway? What do I want you to do with it? This is the framework. Does that make sense? Is it super mysterious? It should be. You're the only people that have ever seen this. I will post these slides, so some of you that are like frantically with your cell phone clicking on every picture of every slide, I will post these so you'll find them online. Some of you are going to say, wait a minute, What's this whole source thing? What's the source? Where do I find this source? How do I figure out the thing that's going to trigger me to write this stuff? It sounds like you're talking about inspiration and I don't have any. I'm not. This is Facebook. On Facebook, this says, these are actual complaints received by Thomas Cook Vacations from dissatisfied customers. And the first complaint says, on my holiday to Goa in India, I was disgusted to find that almost every restaurant served curry. I don't like spicy food. There are like 30 or 40 more of those statements. That's a source. Now, we don't normally recognize that, right? Because our eyes aren't prepped, our ears aren't prepped to see and hear the sources of our stories. But the truth is, you can turn that into something very valuable. Because what is the underlying truth of that post? The truth is, sometimes we complain about silly things. Or the truth is, there's a whole lot of stupid in this world. It doesn't matter what you find, it's going to be you and your voice and your take and your history. You're going to find source out of that. And you're going to go, oh, I can write all sorts of words about that. Oh, if I'm looking at it right, if I see it right, I can turn that into a post. Turns out the source was in front of you the whole time. Most of us just run right by it. We're scrolling and we're scrolling and we're scrolling, and we don't stop to pay attention to sources of stories that we go, oh, yeah, this is good. I can use this. They're complaining about something. How many of you have ever heard of a managed WordPress host? Okay, some of you. So a company like WP Engine is a managed WordPress host. Do you know how many people complain that they can't get FTP access or MySQL access to a database at WP Engine? It happens all the time. Do you know how ridiculous that statement is? That they're complaining about a lack of access to databases when this entire infrastructure is set up to protect you from databases? It's like complaining about curry in India on a vacation because you don't like spicy food. Now see, some of you are like, I don't know what he just said there. It was a lot of words with managed and WordPress and MySQL. Let me break it down for you. The managed host is set up so that an end user who signs up for an account doesn't have to be technical. So you can imagine the ridiculousness of a request of a non-technical person because they talked to some technical friend of theirs. And the friend said, well, all you need is MySQL access. So they type in the thing, hey, I need MySQL access. And the company goes, I'm sorry, I think there's a confusion here because we provide a service that makes it so you don't need that. You're like, but I'm complaining because I paid you $9, $19, $29, and I should have X, whatever X is. I could write an entire post about hosting and managed hosting from a Facebook post about Thomas Cook vacation complaints. Now, maybe you're like, no, I can't do that, Chris. I'm just not you. You're like, okay, so let's look at another source. Right? My friend Andrea Rennick, she makes quilts. She's amazing. She made this quilt. Is it showing yet? Tomorrow at some point, I'm assuming David is going to show us this amazing quilt she made. Now, some of you are going, how's that a source for a story? But wait a second. How many of you are not developers? Okay, great. How many of you feel like when you're hanging around a bunch of those nerds, the only thing you get to say is, well, I've been on a date? Right? I mean, because they're all sitting here like, have you contributed code? Have you written code? Have you written a plugin? And you're like, I don't do any of that. But what if I told you there was a way to contribute to a community without writing code? And what if I started with a picture of a quilt? The source of our stories is right in front of us all the time. See, what happens is we have to look at that source. This is that pyramid again. We have to look at the source and from the source say, what story can I tell from this source? And you realize for every source you look at, if you ask the question, what story can I tell? And then what lesson can I take away from that? And then how do I shape it for this audience? And what do I want them to do? You realize that I can tell people, hey, it doesn't matter if you don't code. It doesn't matter what kind of crafty skill you have. You can make an impact in the community that you're in. You can get involved. You can do things that other people will cherish. You can use your creative talents. And this is what I want you to go do. And I can end with something that causes people to act from a picture on Instagram. I don't have to wait till I'm inspired. I don't have to wait at all. I see the source, I save it to a file, and when it's time to write, I sit down at the computer and I go, let me look at all my sources, pick one, what's the story, what's the lesson, how do I shape it for the audience, and go from there. My friend Jesse Peterson wrote on Twitter, hey, all I have to do is not compare, aspire. We all have unique starting points, tools, and priorities. And then he put hashtag end of story. And immediately my response was, no, it's not end of story. It's hashtag beginning of story. And I could write an entire post on why not comparing and running your own journey and not worrying about anybody else is the beginning of your story. And you could too, from a tweet on Twitter. Someone records a podcast. Hey, people who are diligent prosper. I haven't even listened to the podcast. I don't want to know what he has to say. I can write what I have to say. Is this making sense? I have a friend that just spoke, Tony from Sakuri. He just spoke at a Yoast event. If I go to an event and I hear someone speak, I can write a recap of that. I can say, hey, this is what he had to say, and it's interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of StoryCorps, but it's people who walk around and they record interviews with other people. Now, the mobile app doesn't have the best of or popular, but the website itself has popular. You can click popular, and you can listen to stories, incredible stories, and go, oh my God, I could totally write about that. Sometimes it just happens in real life. You pull your car up next to a truck that has a big sign in the back that says, you owe me 30 grand, would you please pay me my money? And you're like, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to save that into my source file. Sometimes I use Evernote, other times people just use a folder. So just save it. Because at some point when it's time to write, you sit at the computer, you pull it up, and you're like, oh yeah, I can go 12 different ways with this. Once you develop an audience, they become a source too. Because once you have an audience, they have pain and they have questions. And both pain and questions are sources as well. But developing an audience takes time. It's not going to happen right away. And that's when we get to our fifth. And our fifth is we quit too soon because we're impatient. We quit too soon because we don't compare with someone else. Our numbers aren't as good as someone else's. And that will never work. It looks easy. Whether it's a presentation and someone's speaking, or whether it's a blog post, or it's 900 posts, it looks easy. The reason it looks easy is because someone has done it 200, 300, 400 times. They make it look easy. But it is hard work. I can give you a framework, I can give you tips. I cannot give you the drive to do the work. That's only what you bring to the table. But if you bring the drive to do the work, you can do it. My name is Chris Thumma. I work at a company called Crowd Favorite. You can find my blog at christhumma.com and find me on Twitter at @ChrisThumma. Thank you very much.